But there is pressure on masajid to do that. And many masajid have said, if you want to have nikah in our masajid, you're going to have to also show us a certificate of English civil marriage registry as well. They put pressure, and of course, many of these mosque imams, when the British government come and knocking, they go, yes, Sab, yes, G Sab, I'll do what you want. They don't show any backbone, right? They don't actually push back and say, sorry, who are you to get involved in our affairs? Yeah. Now, the British government hasn't stopped in just pressuring mosque imams. Of course, they don't like the fact that there is Muslim nikah going on. I mean, they won't mind if Muslims are committing zina. Well, that's all right. But if Muslims are trying to abide by their deen, but it's something that is outside of English law, this goes down to the deep secular liberal fear that human beings should have any law other than the ones that they fabricate. That's what is really behind this, is that a Muslim should deem that the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the highest, is something they deem to be an inimicable threat to their civilization, quote unquote, if you can call it that. So they started to take measures in England to see what they could do to pressure Muslims to register the civil marriage. Now, before I go into that, what's wrong with English civil marriage? What's wrong with civil law marriages in the West? Well, people might say, like if the husband dies, if they're married, then the wife gets obviously some property to support herself. What about if he's on life support and she has to be asked to, whether he has to pull the plug or not, she has power of attorney. Why is that wrong? Why is that bad? Well, those things of themselves, anyway, are not the issue here. The issue here is when marriages go wrong, when divorce happens. And this is where we see the clash with the hukum of Allah occurs more significantly. Because in English civil law marriage and in the West, they have a principle that came from the Christian times, which is that when a man and woman married, they became one flesh, right? They became one. Now, what it used to be up until the 19th century was that the property of the woman and the man become one, but the husband gets to control what's been done with that property. So many English men will get married to a wealthy heiress just to control her property and have lots of money. Now, eventually, there was issues that they said this was unjust and women should be allowed to control their own property. I said, okay, that seems fair, right? But they never got rid of the idea that when a married couple get married, their property becomes one, right? Now they have issues now where, the property becomes one, but there's now disputes over finance, over money, over the expenses. In fact, disputes over finances are actually one of the leading causes of divorce in the West, because as an Arabic saying goes, a horse cannot have two riders, right? You can't have two masters or two leaders or two bosses or what have you. You have to have someone that should be responsible for the household finances generally. But that aside, wherein lies the problem with this idea of property becoming one? Well, the problem occurs when a divorce happens, and let's say one of these people, one of the spouses, didn't bring any property into the marriage. Maybe they only got married for a few months. But when the divorce happens, the default setting for all court cases is 50-50 split. And it doesn't matter why the divorce happened. Many cases of non-Muslim men and even Muslim men being cheated on, their wife cheated on them, and then goes to divorce. The court gives the house to the wife, and she gets to live in it with her boyfriend. The house that belonged to the husband that he brought into the marriage. It was before he got married. Right? Because in divorce courts, they look at, we need to guarantee everyone has a place to stay. So if a man is bringing in income and the woman isn't bringing in income, for example, then he can just rent out an apartment Whereas if he has a house, then that house should go to the person who doesn't have an income or has a lesser income. And by that, people are deprived of their property unfairly and unjustly. And it doesn't even, not even men are feeling the brunt of it. There was a case of wealthy businesswomen who get married and they have a husband that doesn't have much or what have you, and he gets 50% of their property. Only then the feminists started to take notice. Oh, wait a second, we didn't like that. We don't want that. Oh, it's gone a bit too far. We thought it was just for women. Oh no, the door swings both ways. And this is what they want to bring into the Muslim community. That when divorces happen, regardless of the circumstances, the people's property gets deprived of them. And in Islam, Islamic law, when two people get married, their property doesn't become one. They each retain ownership of their own property. So you can't touch the other person's property in Islam without their consent, without them gifting it to you or what have you. But because the law divides 50-50 and apportions it, unscrupulous ex-spouses exploit that to say, well, it's my right. I demand 50%. I demand the house, the car, and 50% of the assets, even if that lady was only married for a few months. And many men are not just losing their kids, but they're losing their properties. How are they going to get remarried? They don't have a house anymore. Yeah? What about their future? They have to pay alimony forever. They might only be married for a few months. Right? This is not just injustice, this is stealing. But you'd be surprised how many Muslims who are in divorce cases will grab anything they can when the ship is sinking. They'll grab it. Right? And this is what the British government want to foist upon you. I saw in